Hey guys, tonight we embark on a journey unlike any other, drifting across the immense, star-dusted canvas of the Pacific Ocean. Forget your GPS, forget your compass, forget even knowing for sure if that distant smudge on the horizon is an island, or just a particularly stubborn cloud having an existential crisis. We're stepping back in time, placing ourselves you aboard a traditional Polynesian voyaging canoe, a Waka or Waka, depending on where exactly our imagination anchors us tonight. Imagine the sheer scale of it, the largest ocean on Earth, stretching out in every direction, an endless expanse of deep blue mystery, and you're crossing it in what essentially amounts to a couple of hollowed-out logs lashed together with some very hopeful-looking rope. You probably wouldn't survive this in real life, let's be honest. Modern comforts have made us delightfully soft. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is locally. It's always fascinating to see where these stories drift off to. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The salt spray kisses your face, cool and sharp against the warmth of the midday sun beating down. Look around. There's nothing but water meeting sky, a perfect, unbroken circle. It's beautiful, yes, in a terrifyingly vast sort of way. The canoe beneath you isn't some flimsy raft though. It's a marvel of Stone Age engineering, often a double-hulled vessel, providing stability in the rolling swells. Feel the gentle rock, the rhythmic creak of the timbers held together by cenote cordage, coconut fiber rope, painstakingly braided and immensely strong. It's a sound that becomes the background music to your existence out here. You're part of a small crew, maybe a dozen souls, sharing this tiny, moving island. Space is tight, privacy, a forgotten luxury, like artisanal cheese or Wi-Fi. Your world has shrunk to the confines of this vessel, maybe 60, 70 feet long, yet paradoxically, it's the key to unlocking a watery world bigger than continents. It's a well-known fact that Polynesian navigators settled a vast triangle of the Pacific, from Hawaii in the north to Easter Island, Rapa Nui in the southeast, and New Zealand, Aotearoa in the southwest, an area larger than North America. They did this centuries before Europeans dared venture far from coastal waters, using sophisticated non-instrument navigation. But how? That's the journey we're on. It wasn't magic, though it certainly feels like it. It was deep, intricate, knowledge passed down through generations. A living library held in the minds of master navigators, the tuna or Palu. You are, for tonight, an apprentice, trying to absorb even a fraction of this wisdom. The sheer audacity of setting sail into the blue, aiming for specks of land hundreds, sometimes thousands, of miles away, is staggering. Think about packing for a week-long trip today, the agonizing choices, the extra suitcase, just in case. Now imagine packing for a voyage of unknown duration, possibly months, where everything you need to survive, food, water, tools, shelter, minimal as it is, has to fit on this canoe, alongside pigs, chickens, and vital plants like taro and breadfruit needed to start life anew on shores unseen. It makes that extra pair of shoes seem rather trivial, doesn't it? One slightly less discussed, almost quirky detail is how they managed fresh water. While rainwater catchment was crucial, historians suggest they also sometimes drank coconut water, and perhaps even, in dire straits, carefully consumed certain fish fluids, or limited amounts of seawater, a practice modern science strongly advises against, like using your phone while it's charging overnight. We all still do it though, right? Your senses become your instruments. The feel of the wind on your skin, its subtle shifts in direction and temperature tells a story. The patterns of the waves, the swells generated by distant storms, carry information across hundreds of miles. You learn to read the ocean's surface like a map. But the primary guide, especially at night, is the sky. Not just the moon, but the stars. Hundreds of them. You begin to see them not as random sprinkles of light, but as fixed points, reliable signposts on a celestial highway. Historians still discuss the exact sequence and timing of the migrations across the Pacific. Some argue for rapid expansion bursts, others for slower, more incremental island hopping over centuries, spurred by population pressure, resource depletion, or perhaps just that innate human curiosity, the what's over there impulse that sent people across continents and now across this immense ocean. You feel the canoe slice through another wave, the spray momentarily cool. Below deck, someone starts a soft chant, a rhythm to keep spirits up, a reminder of the community sharing this tiny, vital space in the middle of the endless blue. The challenge is immense, the margin for error terrifyingly slim, but the spirit of exploration, of finding a way, is palpable in the creaking wood and the determined eyes of the navigator scanning the horizon. All right, let's take a closer look at this vessel carrying you across the endless blue. Your trusty Waka, or Waka, isn't just a boat. It's a masterpiece of ingenuity, a testament to generations of accumulated knowledge, and, in many ways, a living entity itself. Feel the deck beneath your feet, likely planks laid across two parallel hulls, carved from massive tree trunks like koa or breadfruit trees. This double-hull design is the most widely recognized feature, providing crucial stability in the open ocean. Unlike a monohull that might roll precariously, your Waka sits more like a catamaran, confidently straddling the swells. It's the ocean equivalent of having training wheels, except these training wheels are capable of crossing thousands of miles of deep water, so maybe not the best analogy. Still, you appreciate the stability. Nobody enjoys an unexpected swim halfway to Hawaii. The hulls themselves are things of beauty. Long and relatively narrow, shaped with incredible precision using tools that make your modern power tools look like overkill. Think adzes made of stone or shell, painstakingly chipping away wood, guided by an innate understanding of hydrodynamics. The surfaces might not be perfectly smooth like fiberglass, but they possess a functional elegance designed to slip through the water with minimal resistance. Run your hand along the gunnel, the upper edge of the hull. Feel the texture of the wood, weathered by sun and salt. It smells faintly of the forest it came from, mingled with the sharp temps of the sea. Connecting the two hulls are crossbeams, known as ayako in Hawaiian, lashed securely in place. And when we say lashed, we mean lashed. Forget duct tape or rusty bolts. This is high-tech Stone Age joinery. Miles of cordage, usually sennit, made from coconut husks, treated for water resistance, are wrapped in intricate patterns, cinching the timbers together with immense pressure. These lashings aren't rigid. They allow the canoe's structure a degree of flexibility, letting it twist and adapt to the relentless motion of the waves, rather than fighting against it and potentially breaking. It's a bit like a skyscraper designed to sway slightly in the wind, except, made of wood and floating. Checking and tightening these lashings is a constant task on a long voyage. You might even find yourself helping out, learning the specific knots and rhythms required, feeling the satisfying tension as the fibers bite into the wood. Rising above the deck is the mast, often stepped on a platform connecting the hulls, supporting the sail. The sail itself is another marvel. Typically a triangular or crab claw shape, woven from pandanus leaves or similar tough plant fibers. It's surprisingly efficient, capable of capturing wind from various angles. Learning to trim the sail, adjusting its angle to the wind with ropes, becomes second nature. You feel the power of the wind filling the sail, hear the taut creak of the mast and rigging, and watch as the canoe surges forward, leaving a gentle wake bubbling behind. Steering isn't done with a fancy wheel, but usually with a long, heavy steering paddle or oar, often wielded from the stern. It requires strength and sensitivity, feeling the water's pressure, making constant small adjustments to keep the Waka on course. It's less like driving a car and more like dancing with the ocean, a very slow, deliberate dance where one wrong step could lead you wildly off course. Now, here's a slightly more peculiar detail. The choice of wood wasn't always just about strength or availability. Some traditions held that certain trees possessed specific spiritual qualities or mana. Building a canoe wasn't just carpentry. It was a deeply spiritual act. The selection of the trees, the felling, the carving, all were often accompanied by rituals and chants, seeking the blessing of the forest gods and imbuing the vessel with the necessary spirit to survive the dangers of the sea. The canoe was often considered female, a mother figure protecting her crew. There's ongoing academic discussion, naturally, about the precise nature and uniformity of these beliefs across Polynesia. Did every island group view their canoes as sentient? Was the mana inherent in the wood, or conferred through ritual, like trying to decipher ancient emojis? The exact interpretations remain debated by scholars hunched over dusty texts, while you're out here actually feeling the living pulse of the wood beneath you. The Waka is more than just transport. It's a microcosm of society, a sacred space. Strict protocols, or kapu, often governed behavior on board. Certain areas might be reserved for the navigator, others for specific tasks. Waste disposal was carefully managed. You didn't just chuck your banana peels anywhere. That's how you annoy the ocean gods, or at least the person sitting downwind. The canoe connected the crew, not only to each other, but also to their ancestors, who sailed similar vessels across the same waters, guided by the same stars. It carried their hopes, their lineage, and their future. Every creak of the timber, every splash of water against the hulls, seems to echo with those past voyages. It's humbling to realize you're part of such a long and profound tradition, even if your main contribution so far has been trying not to trip over the fishing gear. Don't worry, you'll get your sea legs eventually. Or maybe not. Some people just aren't built for constant rocking. At least the view is nice. As daylight fades, painting the western sky in hues you didn't even know existed. Fiery oranges, soft purples, fading to bruised indigo, a different world awakens above you. Out here, far from the light pollution that smothers the view. Back home, remember cities, noisy, bright things. The night sky is overwhelming. It's not just a scattering of stars. It's a thick, glittering blanket, so dense with light it feels almost tangible. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a luminous river, and constellations you might vaguely recognize seem sharper, brighter, somehow closer. This celestial spectacle isn't just for stargazing though. For the master navigator guiding your Waka, this is the primary map, the compass, the clock, the original GPS, powered by nuclear fusion millions of miles away. No subscription fees, but the user manual is a bit intense. You learn quickly that navigation isn't about finding one single star, like Polaris, the North Star, which is a common misconception and largely useless south of the equator, where most of this voyaging happened. Instead, the Polynesian navigator uses a whole system, a star compass. Imagine the horizon as a circle divided into points, maybe 32 of them. Each point corresponds to the rising or setting position of specific stars or constellations. As a star rises in the east, its position marks a bearing. As it sets in the west, it marks another. By knowing the sequence of stars that rise and set along particular paths, the navigator can hold a steady course throughout the night. You watch the navigator, perhaps sitting silently at the stern, eyes constantly scanning the heavens, occasionally murmuring star names like old friends Hokale, Arcturus, Kiali, Akona, Ikalua, Sirius, Makali, I Pleiades. Memorizing. This celestial dance is the core of the training. It's not just knowing what stars are up there, but understanding their precise paths across the sky, how those paths change with the seasons, and how they relate to your intended direction. Think of it like learning all the streets in a massive, constantly rotating city, but without street signs and where half the landmarks disappear below the horizon every 12 hours. Easy, right? You try to follow along, picking out prominent shapes, the elegant curve of Maui's Fishhook Scorpius to western eyes, the unmistakable diamond of the Southern Cross, Honaikamama. You see how they wheel overhead as the hours pass, pivoting around celestial poles you can't quite pinpoint yet. The navigator might point out a specific star just clearing the horizon, that one rises where Hawaii lies. They might murmur, referring to the ancestral homeland, or perhaps the target island. One of the most ingenious techniques is using zenith stars to determine latitude, your north-south position. Certain stars pass directly overhead at their zenith, only at specific latitudes. If you know that a particular star, let's say Arcturus, passes directly over Hawaii, then when you sail north and see Arcturus pass exactly overhead at its highest point, you know you've reached the latitude of Hawaii. Then you just need to sail east or west along that line of latitude until land appears. It sounds simple, but it requires incredibly precise observation and knowledge of which stars correspond to which islands. It's like having invisible latitude lines painted across the night sky, accessible only to those who know the code. You crane your neck back, watching the stars drift, trying to imagine one passing exactly overhead. It makes your neck ache, just thinking about the constant observation required. Here's a fascinating tidbit that often gets less airtime. Navigators didn't just use bright, obvious stars. They also paid attention to fainter stars, and even the dark patches or holes within the Milky Way, sometimes seen as celestial creatures or landmarks themselves. Some traditions speak of Kubinga, HK, star homes or reference points just below the horizon, used to anticipate the rising of key navigational stars. It's a level of detail that suggests an incredibly nuanced and intimate relationship with the night sky. Imagine trying to navigate by the absence of light, or by stars so faint they're barely visible. It's like trying to follow directions whispered in a crowded room. Yet somehow it worked. Of course, the exact methods and the extent to which star knowledge was systematized across the vast Pacific is a subject of lively academic debate. Were there physical star charts, perhaps made of shells and sticks, like those found in the Marshall Islands, though their primary use is debated? Or was the knowledge purely oral, transmitted through chants, genealogies, and intense mental mapping? Anthropologists and historians argue about the degree of variation between different island groups. Did a navigator from Tahiti use the exact same star compass points as one from Samoa? It's likely there were regional variations, local adaptations based on specific voyages and island locations, much like dialects of a language, while the scholars debate the finer points in air-conditioned libraries. You're out here, feeling the damp night air, watching the real thing unfold. The system isn't foolproof, naturally. What happens when clouds roll in, obscuring your celestial map, or when a storm throws you wildly off course? This is where other skills, like reading the waves, which we'll get to, become vital. But the stars are the bedrock, the most reliable constant in this shifting, watery world. The pressure on the navigator is immense. A mistake doesn't just mean missing lunch. It means missing an island entirely, potentially drifting into oblivion. No pressure though, just the survival of everyone on board, resting on your ability to remember if that twinkly one was Sirius rising, or just a particularly reflective piece of space junk. Okay, probably not space junk back then. Maybe a confused firefly. You pull your thin sleeping mat closer, the vastness above both comforting and utterly terrifying. The canoe rocks gently, a tiny cradle under an infinite, watchful sky. So, the stars are fantastic, truly the Alisters of ancient navigation. But what happens when the sun climbs high, washing out the celestial map? Or when clouds roll in, thick and grey, pulling a fuzzy blanket over your reliable guides? Does the navigator just shrugged, pull out a pack of cards, and hope for the best? Not quite, because the ocean itself speaks, though its language is subtle, written in whispers on the water's surface and felt deep within the bones of your Waka. You just need to learn how to listen, or rather, how to feel. Forget the choppy, erratic waves kicked up by the local wind blowing right now. Those are like background chatter, mostly noise. You learn to tune them out, focusing instead on the deeper rhythm, the long, rolling swells. These are the ocean's heartbeat, generated by distant storms, sometimes thousands of miles away. They travel across vast stretches of open water, maintaining their direction and energy like tireless messengers. Think of them not as surface waves, but as energy moving through the water. This underlying, organized pattern is your guide during daylight or cloudy nights. It's a widely acknowledged principle that these ocean swells can travel immense distances. Carrying the signature of their origin, you watch the navigator, perhaps lying down on the platform between the hulls, eyes closed, body relaxed but alert. They aren't napping well. Maybe sometimes navigating is tiring work. They are feeling the motion of the canoe, the precise way it lifts, pitches, rolls, and yaws as the swells pass beneath it. By attuning their body to these movements, they can sense the primary swell direction, the one coming from the prevailing wind system or the most significant distant storm. Even subtle secondary swells, coming from other directions, can be detected. It's an incredibly sensitive process, like trying to identify different musical instruments playing simultaneously in a complex orchestra, but using your sense of balance instead of your ears. You try it yourself, lying flat, closing your eyes. At first, it's just confusing motion, but slowly, maybe, you start to discern a dominant rhythm, a primary direction to the rocking. Or maybe you just feel a bit seasick. It takes practice. Lots of practice. The real magic, though, happens when these swells encounter land. Even an island far below the horizon, invisible to your eyes, leaves a signature on the surrounding water. Think of throwing a pebble into a calm pond. Ripples spread outwards. Now, imagine placing a small rock in the pond. As the ripples hit the rock, they change. Some bounce back reflection, others bend around it, refraction, creating a different pattern on the far side. Islands do the same thing to ocean swells. As a deep water swell approaches an island or an atoll, it starts to interact with the sloping seabed. It slows down, its wavelength changes, and it bends. Swells also reflect off the landmass. The result, the smooth, regular pattern of the open ocean swell gets disrupted. This is what the navigator is feeling for the subtle interference patterns. The confusion in the sea state that signals land is ahead, even 50, 100, perhaps more miles away. They might feel a slight shortening of the swell period, a change in its direction, or the presence of a reflected swell coming from the direction of the unseen island, creating It's not a dramatic change, more like a subtle shift in the ocean's rhythm, a slight out-of-sync feeling in the canoe's motion. There might even be a shadow zone directly downswell from an island where the sea feels slightly calmer, though this is often harder to detect reliably. It's like trying to hear a specific conversation across a noisy room. You need to filter out the background and focus on the faint signal. Here's a curious detail navigators learned. To interpret, the type of wave pattern could sometimes hint at the type of island. A high volcanic island might create a different reflection pattern compared to a low-lying coral atoll with a large lagoon. The slope of the underwater terrain drastically affects how waves refract and reflect. Some accounts suggest could differentiate between these island types long before land was sighted, purely by feeling these watery whispers through the hull of the canoe. Imagine being able to tell if you're approaching a mountain or a sandbar, just by how the boat rocks its next level sensitivity, bordering on what seems like a sixth sense, honed over generations. Naturally, the exact science and reliable range of detecting land purely through swell patterns is still debated among researchers and modern replica voyagers. How far out could these subtle changes truly be felt and correctly interpreted? Was it consistently reliable, or more of an indicator used in conjunction with other signs? Factors like the size of the island, the strength and direction of the swells, and the presence of multiple swells complicate the picture immensely. Some scholars emphasize the navigator's almost intuitive synthesis of multiple, often faint, clues, while others focus on the physics of wave mechanics, trying to model the limits of detectability. It's likely a combination, deep knowledge of the principles, combined with extraordinary personal skill and experience, and perhaps, occasionally, a healthy dose of educated guessing. You certainly wouldn't want to bet your life on feeling a slight change in the boat's wobble unless you really knew what you were doing. Kind of like trying to diagnose your car trouble based only on the weird noise it makes. Sometimes you nail it, sometimes you're way off dot. So, even when the stars hide, the journey continues. You feel the constant rise and fall, the subtle dance of the Waka with the ocean swells. The sun warms your skin, the wind whispers past your ears, and somewhere deep in the structure of the canoe, transmitted through the lashed timbers, is the faint, rhythmic pulse of information from unseen shores. The ocean is talking. You just need to learn its quiet, patient language. Okay, so you're getting the hang of feeling the ocean's subtle language through the swells, which is great when the stars are hiding or the sun is high. But the clues don't stop there. Your senses, constantly sharpened by necessity, out. Here, learn to read the air itself, the wind and the clouds, painting stories across the vast blue canvas above. Think of it as nature's own weather channel, broadcasting 24/7, though the reception can be a bit fuzzy sometimes, and the forecasts are definitely less specific than your app back home that tells you there's a 30% chance of rain at exactly for 17 p.m. The wind, your primary engine when the sail is up, is more than just propulsion. It's information. You already know the basics. The prevailing trade winds in many parts of the Pacific blow with remarkable consistency. A well-established fact that formed the highways for these long-distance voyages. Sailing east often meant battling against them, requiring different strategies, while sailing west could be a relatively smoother ride. But the navigator pays attention to much more than just the main breeze. Feel it now, the steady push against your cheek, the faint whistle in the rigging. Is it constant? Or are there subtle lulls, slight shifts in direction? These minute variations can speak volumes as you approach an island. Even one still far beyond the horizon, it can disrupt the wind patterns just like it disrupts the swells. Land masses heat up and cool down differently than the surrounding ocean, creating localized thermal effects. During the day, the land heats faster, causing air to rise and drawing in cooler sea breezes from the ocean. At night, the land cools faster, potentially reversing the flow or creating calmer zones. A skilled navigator can detect these subtle shifts. Perhaps a slight veering of the wind direction that doesn't match the prevailing pattern, or a change in its temperature or humidity, hinting that land is influencing the local airflow. It's like sniffing the air for the faint scent of land. Except you're using your skin and your sense of balance to detect atmospheric changes. You see the navigator turning their face slowly, feeling the air, maybe wetting a finger and holding it up. The original anemometer, though probably less accurate than the spinning cups, and definitely less photogenic on Instagram than there. Are the clouds? Far from being just random puffs of white, clouds become vital signposts. You learn to differentiate the high, wispy cirrus clouds, often heralding a change in weather systems, from the low, puffy cumulus clouds that drift with the lower winds. But the real prize is spotting clouds that indicate land. How can a cloud point to an island? Well, islands, especially mountainous volcanic ones, act like anchors in the sky. As moist ocean air flows towards an island, it's forced upwards by the landmass, cooling as it rises. This cooling causes the moisture to condense, forming clouds, while the lower winds might be blowing steadily. These island-generated clouds can appear stationary, hovering directly over or slightly downwind of the invisible land. Spotting a lone, persistent cloud in an otherwise clear sky, or a fixed point in a stream of moving clouds, is a major clue. It's like seeing a single streetlight still on in the distance. When the rest of the town is dark, something is definitely over there. There's also the intriguing phenomenon of cloud color, the underside of clouds hovering over a shallow lagoon within an atoll can sometimes take on a faint greenish tint, reflecting the vibrant color of the water below. Similarly, clouds over dense forests might appear slightly darker. It's a subtle effect, easily missed, and requires ideal lighting conditions, usually around sunrise or sunset. Think of it like trying to judge the color of a shirt under weird Fluorescent lighting in a store changing room. Tricky, but sometimes possible. This reflected light, known as lagoon glare or land loom, is one of those almost mythical sounding skills, but one consistently reported in navigational traditions. A particularly quirky cloud formation, sometimes sought by navigators, is the cap cloud that can form over the peak of a high island, looking like a little hat perched on top. Even if the island itself is below the horizon, this telltale cloud might be visible, peeking above it. Of course, differentiating a true land-indicating cloud from just a regular run-of-the-mill cloud that happens to be hanging around requires immense experience. Is that cloud really stationary, or is it just moving very slowly? Is that greenish tint real, or just wishful thinking combined with the weird light? You squint at the horizon, trying to see patterns, feeling a newfound respect for meteorologists, even the ones who get the forecast wrong half the time. The reliability and range at which these cloud and wind signs can be accurately interpreted is, naturally, a topic of ongoing study and sometimes debate among modern researchers and voyaging societies replicating these journeys. How far away can a stationary cloud be reliably identified? How much does atmospheric haze or different weather conditions affect visibility? Some argue these signs are only useful relatively close to land, perhaps within 30 to 50 miles, while traditional accounts sometimes suggest detection at greater distances. It's likely that, as with swells, it wasn't one single sign but the convergence of multiple indicators, a subtle wind shift, plus a stationary cloud, plus a change in swell pattern that gave the navigator confidence. Its pattern, recognition on an epic scale, processing multiple streams of faint environmental data simultaneously. Your brain feels tired just contemplating it. Maybe a quick nap is in order, just to process all this new information. Don't worry, someone else is watching the clouds. Probably so you lie back, feeling the wind, watching the clouds drift or stubbornly stay put. The sky above isn't just empty space. It's alive with information, a dynamic map constantly, updating itself. The stars rule the night, the swells speak from the deep, and the wind and clouds whisper secrets across the daylight hours. Piece by piece, you're learning the language of the Pacific, guided by senses you barely knew you had. Beyond the subtle shifts in wind, waves, and clouds, the living world around you also offers vital clues. The vast Pacific isn't empty. It teems with life, and some of its inhabitants, particularly those with wings, act as unwitting guides there. Daily routines and seasonal journeys painting invisible lines across the ocean, pointing towards the land they need for rest or nesting. You learn to watch the sky not just for clouds, but for feathers. It's common knowledge that many bird species undertake incredible long-distance migrations. What Polynesian navigators mastered was interpreting the flight paths of specific types of birds encountered far out at sea. There are two main categories you learn to watch for. First, there are the land-nesting seabirds that forage far offshore during the day but must return to land each evening to roost. Think of species like boobies, frigate birds, or terns. Seeing these birds flying purposefully in a particular direction late in the afternoon is a strong indicator that land lies that way, likely within their flight range, perhaps 30 to 100 miles, depending on the species. Conversely, seeing them flying out from a direction early in the morning tells you where land was. Confirming your general orientation, it's like watching commuters heading home after work. You know the city must be in that direction. You scan the horizon, watching a lone frigate bird soaring effortlessly, its angular silhouette stark against the setting sun. Is it heading home, or just looking for one last snack before calling it a day? Judging intent in birds is probably harder than judging it in humans, and that's saying something. Then there are the true long-distance migratory birds, the champions of avian travel, like the Pacific golden plover, Collier in Hawaiian, or the bristle-filled curlew. These birds breed in the Arctic during the northern summer and fly thousands of miles non-stop across the open ocean to spend the winter on Pacific islands, including Hawaii, Fiji, and even as far south as New Zealand. Their migration routes are remarkably consistent, passed down genetically or learned. Encountering flocks of these specific migratory birds during their travel season, flying in a determined direction, provides a powerful clue about the general bearing of island groups along their route. It's not pinpoint accuracy, as they might be heading for any number of islands along a broad path, but it confirms you're likely on a known flyway between major landmasses. It's nature's equivalent of seeing highway signs for major cities hundreds of miles away. You know you're on the right road. Generally speaking, observing their behavior is key. Are they flying high and fast, clearly on a mission, or are they circling, perhaps feeding? Are they flying in large flocks or as individuals? The navigator notes all this. You might see a flock of plovers, tiny specks against the immense sky, flying with unwavering determination southeast. The navigator nods, confirming this aligns with the expected direction of a known island chain during this season. It's reassuring, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. You try to imagine the energy it takes for these small birds to cross such vast distances. Makes your complaint about the legroom on your last flight seem a bit petty, doesn't it? Here's a more unusual feathered clue. The presence of certain birds far from land could sometimes indicate specific conditions. For example, seeing birds associated with shallower waters or lagoons, when you believed you were still in deep ocean, might suggest you're nearing an unseen atoll faster than expected. Or perhaps the type of fish they are seen catching hints at the marine environment nearby. It's like being a detective, piecing together clues from seemingly unrelated observations. Did that tern dive for a fish typically found near reefs? Interesting, very interesting. You start paying more attention to the bird life, realizing they aren't just background decoration, of course. Relying on birds isn't without its challenges, leading to the inevitable academic head-scratching. How reliable was this method? Bird migration paths can shift slightly year to year. Storms can blow birds off course, just like they can blow you off course. And how far out could you realistically identify specific species and interpret their behavior correctly? Was it a primary navigation technique, or more of a confirmation used when other signs pointed towards land? Some researchers emphasize the importance of birds, particularly land-roosting species, as reliable indicators within a certain range, while others are more skeptical about using long-distance migrants for precise targeting, suggesting they offered more general, directional confirmation. The truth, as usual, is likely somewhere in between, a valuable tool in the Navigator's extensive kit, used judiciously and interpreted in context. It wasn't like they had little bird GPS trackers back then, pinging the nearest island. Though, wouldn't that have been handy? Maybe less romantic, though. The sounds birds make can also be clues, especially as you get closer to land. The calls of certain seabirds become more frequent. At night, near islands with large nesting colonies, The sheer cacophony drifting across the water can be an auditory beacon long before anything is visible. You strain your ears, listening past the creak of the canoe and the rush of water. Was that the cry of a tern, or just the wind playing tricks again? Your senses are on high alert, constantly probing the environment for any hint, any sign that the endless blue is about to be broken by the welcome sight of green. Following these feathered friends, interpreting their flights and calls, adds another layer to the navigator's art. It connects the canoe not just to the sea and sky, but to the rhythms of life that pulse across the vast ocean. The birds become fellow travelers, their instincts, and ancient roots woven into the complex tapestry of wayfinding. You watch a small group of white terns dip and wheel in the distance, their wings flashing in the sun, and wonder where they might be heading. Hopefully, somewhere with trees, and maybe snacks. So, you've learned to read the stars, interpret the subtle language of the swells, decipher clues in the wind and clouds, and even follow the flight paths of birds. Impressive. You're practically halfway to being a navigator yourself, except you're missing the most crucial piece of equipment, the central processing unit that makes sense of all this disparate data, the navigator's own mind. Forget fancy charts or sextants. The primary navigational tool is carried between the ears, a meticulously constructed, constantly updated internal database, a true mind palace. Long before Sherlock made it cool. This wasn't knowledge picked up in a weekend workshop. Becoming a master navigator, a Palu or Tathuna, was often a lifelong commitment, frequently starting in childhood. You, as an apprentice, would spend years, decades even, absorbing information. Much of it was through direct observation, just like you're doing now. Watching the stars wheel overhead, night after night, feeling the canoe's motion day after day, learning to identify birds, clouds, and wave patterns until they become as familiar as the faces of your family. But observation alone isn't enough. You need to store this vast amount of information, organize it, and retrieve it instantly when needed. And remember, this is a society largely without written language for this purpose. No handy notebooks, no laminated cheat sheets. It all had to be stored in here, pointing to your temple. The sheer volume of data is staggering. It's not just knowing the names of a few dozen stars. It's knowing their precise rising and setting points throughout the year. Their paths across the sky at different latitudes, which stars pass directly overhead, specific islands, Zenith. Stars, and how their positions relate to your target direction. It's memorizing the characteristics of different ocean swells, their direction, period, and how they interact with land. It's knowing the seasonal patterns of winds and bird migrations for different regions of the ocean. And crucially, it's holding a mental map of the ocean itself. The locations of hundreds of islands, their relative positions, the distances, and travel times between them, the locations of treacherous reefs or favorable currents. It makes remembering all your online passwords seem like child's play. How was this colossal amount of information encoded and passed down? Primarily through sophisticated oral traditions. Long, complex chants were a key method. These weren't just sea shanties. They were intricate mnemonic devices embedding star positions, island locations, and sailing directions within rhythmic verses and genealogies. Reciting the chant correctly meant recalling the navigational information accurately. Imagine a song where each verse guides you from one island to the next, naming the steering stars, the expected swells, the birds you might see, and the approximate travel time. You'd practice these chants endlessly, until they were etched into your memory, the rhythm reinforcing the sequence. Sometimes genealogies themselves encoded geography, linking lineages to specific islands or migration routes. Stories and myths also played a role, weaving navigational knowledge into narratives about gods, heroes, and voyages. The adventures of Maui or Hina might contain embedded clues about island locations or celestial events. It's a far more engaging way to learn than staring at a textbook diagram, though probably requires a better attention span than most of us possess in the age of infinite scrolling. You listen as the navigator softly recites a chant, the syllables flowing like the water around you, and realize you're hearing a living map, a library carried on the breath. One fascinating, though perhaps less universally applied, concept, sometimes discussed in relation to Micronesian navigation, a related but distinct tradition is the idea of ipak, or a moving reference island. The navigator mentally visualizes a reference island off to the side of their course and tracks their progress by imagining how the bearing to that reference island changes as the canoe moves forward. It's a complex dynamic mental model, allowing for calculation of position and distance traveled relative to unseen points. While the specifics varied, the underlying principle of dynamic mental modeling was likely crucial across Polynesia. To dot this intense mental training wasn't just about rote memorization. It was about building a deeply integrated cognitive map, a flexible understanding of the ocean environment. The navigator needed to synthesize information from multiple sources: stars, swells, wind, birds, and constantly update their position and course. What if the wind shifted unexpectedly? What if clouds obscured the stars for days? They needed fallback strategies, cross-referencing different clues, constantly calculating and recalculating. It required immense focus, concentration, and an almost intuitive feel for the environment, developed over years of experience. The pressure is immense. Forget where you parked your canoe, and you don't just wander the parking lot for an hour. You might drift for weeks. The precise structure and nature of these mental maps remain a subject of considerable interest and debate for cognitive scientists and anthropologists. Were they truly map-like, visual representations held in the mind's eye? Or were they more like a complex set of relational data, linking stars to islands, swells to directions, without necessarily forming a bird's-eye view? How much standardization was there versus individual adaptation and improvisation? Reconstructing the cognitive processes of past non-literate societies is inherently challenging, relying on interpretations of oral traditions, archaeological evidence, and modern replica voyages. Researchers use everything from computer modeling of voyages to cognitive testing of contemporary traditional navigators, where the tradition survives to try and understand this remarkable intellectual achievement. While they publish papers, you simply watch the navigator, their calm focus, a testament to the power of a well-trained mind navigating not just the ocean, but an ocean of information. You realize that the journey isn't just across the water. It's also an internal one, a journey into the capabilities of human memory, observation, and deduction. The navigator's mind palace is the invisible architecture supporting this entire endeavor. A quiet, powerful engine turning faint clues into a pathway across the void. It becomes clear the more time you spend on this Waka, drifting under the immense Pacific sky, that Polynesian navigation isn't just about learning a series of techniques. Star paths here, swell patterns there, bird flights over yonder. It's deeper than that. It's a philosophy, a way of being in the world, or more accurately, a way of being part of the ocean environment. You start to grasp that the navigator isn't merely an observer imposing calculations onto nature. They are an integral component of the system, a living sensor array plugged directly into the pulse of the sea and sky. Forget the detached objectivity prized in Western science for centuries. This is about profound, embodied connection. Remember all those individual clues we've talked about. The stars, the swells, the wind, the clouds, the birds. The true mastery lies not just in recognizing each one, but in synthesizing them into a single, coherent understanding of your place within the moving, dynamic world. It's like listening to an orchestra. You can pick out the violins, the trumpets, the drums, but the real experience is hearing them all together, the harmony and counterpoint, creating something larger than the sum of its parts. The navigator feels the swell pattern while watching the stars, while noting the wind direction, while subconsciously registering the cry of a distant bird. It's continuous, multi-sensory data processing on a level that makes your smartphones multitasking look sluggish. This holistic approach stems from a worldview where the natural world isn't separate from the human one. The ocean, the sky, the canoe, the crew, they are all interconnected. The navigator attunes themselves to this connection, using their entire body as an instrument. We talked about feeling the swells through the hull, but it goes beyond just detecting direction. It's feeling the character of the ocean at that moment. Is it agitated, calm, confused? Does it feel healthy or somehow disturbed? These might sound like vague, almost mystical concepts, but they represent the synthesis of countless subtle cues: the frequency of wave crests, the amount of spray, the sound of the water against the hulls, the way the canoe itself responds. Think about how you might feel the atmosphere in a room when you walk intense, relaxed, cheerful. You're not measuring decibel levels or air pressure. You're subconsciously processing body language, tone of voice, ambient noise, maybe even subtle smells, into a holistic impression. The navigator does something similar, but with the entire ocean environment. Their body, especially through years of experience, becomes exquisitely sensitive. Some accounts mention navigators being able to feel subtle changes in water temperature, perhaps indicating different currents, by dipping their hand or even, reportedly, by sensing it through their testicles when sitting low in the canoe. Let's maybe not try that last one ourselves. Seems drafty. This highlights the use of the entire body as a sensory organ, detecting information far beyond what our modern, insulated lives typically allow. This philosophy stands in stark contrast to the Western navigational tradition that developed later, heavily reliant on instruments, the compass, the sextant, the chronometer, and eventually GPS. These tools are designed to provide objective, quantifiable data, isolating specific variables: magnetic north, celestial altitude, precise time from the complexities of the environment. There's immense power in that approach. Of course, it allows for incredible precision and repeatability, but it also creates a degree of separation between the navigator and the world they are traversing. You trust the needle, the readout, the satellite signal, perhaps more than your own senses. The Polynesian navigator, lacking these external aids, had no choice but to cultivate an intense intimacy with the environment, trusting their senses, their memory, and their integrated understanding above all else. This deep connection often had spiritual dimensions. The ocean wasn't just water. It was the realm of powerful gods and spirits, like Kanaloa or Tangaroa. The The stars weren't just balls of gas. They were ancestors or divine beings. Successful navigation wasn't just skillful calculation. It required maintaining the right relationship, pono, with the natural and spiritual world, showing respect, performing rituals, and maintaining harmony within the crew and the canoe. This integration of the practical and the spiritual is a hallmark of many indigenous knowledge systems. Where does the precise observation end and the spiritual intuition begin? That's a question that fascinates anthropologists and historians. Is the Navigators' uncanny ability to find tiny islands purely the result of processing environmental data below the level of conscious awareness, honed by years of practice? Or is there an element of deeper, perhaps non-local connection at play, as some practitioners might suggest? The academic world tends to favor explanations rooted in observable phenomena and cognitive science, emphasizing the extraordinary capabilities of the human brain for pattern recognition and sensory integration, while acknowledging the cultural framework that gives this knowledge meaning. Trying to navigate using only this holistic, embodied method today feels almost impossible for most of us, raised in a world of screens and instruments. Imagine trying to find your way across town purely by feeling the vibrations through your car seat, noticing the way shadows fall, and listening to the birds. You'd likely end up hopelessly lost, possibly in a ditch. It underscores how specialized and deeply ingrained this knowledge system was, requiring a lifetime of immersion. It wasn't just a job. It was a way of perceiving reality. You feel the canoe rise and fall on another long swell, the sun warm on your face, the wind cool on your neck. You try to consciously take it all in, the sound, the feel, the sight, the smell of the salt air, and weave it together. It's overwhelming, but for a fleeting moment, you might sense a flicker of that connection. That feeling of being not just on the ocean, but of it. Days, perhaps weeks, have blurred into a rhythm of sunrises, star-filled nights, and the constant motion of the Waka. You've learned so much, attuned your senses to the subtle language of the Pacific. The stars have guided you, the swells have whispered directions, the clouds and birds have offered confirmation. Your internal map, guided by the navigator's expertise and your own growing awareness, suggests you should be getting close. But close in the vastness of the ocean is a relative term. Now the focus shifts again, sharpening towards detecting the faintest, most ephemeral signs that solid ground, your destination, is finally within reach. It's like playing hide-and-seek in an enormous dark room, and you think you've just heard the hider breathe. The most obvious sign, though often the last to appear, is sight. But we're not talking about seeing the island itself yet. Long before the landmass breaks the horizon, you might spot things associated with it. Floating debris is a classic indicator. A coconut husk, a stray leaf, a branch, or even man-made. Objects carried out by currents. These don't just float randomly in the deep ocean indefinitely. Their presence suggests land isn't too far away, likely upcurrent. You scan the water's surface with renewed intensity. Is that just another piece of seaweed common in the open ocean, or is it a type of plant that only grows near shore? Is that a piece of bamboo, perhaps washed out from a coastal settlement? It requires knowledge of marine botany and oceanography, knowing what shouldn't be out here. It's like finding a discarded coffee cup in the middle of a pristine forest. It tells you someone else has been nearby recently. Then there's the smell. Yes, the smell of the ocean is pervasive, salty, fishy, vast. But as you draw nearer to land, especially after a rain shower or when the wind is just right, you might catch the faintest whiff of something different. The damp, earthy smell of soil and vegetation, the fragrance of unseen flowers carried on, the breeze, or even the smoke from cooking fires if the island is inhabited. Your sense of smell, perhaps dulled by the constant saltiness, suddenly perks up. Was that dirt? It's an incredibly subtle clue, easily missed or dismissed, but one that experienced navigators learned to trust. Imagine trying to smell land. From miles away, it sounds improbable, like trying to smell pizza from across town, though maybe slightly more likely than the pizza thing. Depending on the wind and your level of hunger, water, color, and clarity can also change. The deep, almost violet blue of the open ocean gradually gives way to lighter shades, turquoise, green, as the water becomes shallower and reflects sunlight off the seabed, or contains more sediment washed from the land. You peer over the side of the Waka, watching the water rush past. Does it look different today? Is there a subtle shift in its hue? It's another piece of the puzzle, often confirming other signs. You might also spot marine life associated with coastal areas, certain types of fish that prefer reefs, or perhaps sea turtles heading towards nesting beaches. It's common knowledge that reef ecosystems are vastly different from the open ocean pelagic zone. One of the most magical and sometimes debated signs is bioluminescence. The open ocean has its own faint glow from plankton, but waters near reefs and shores can sometimes be significantly brighter, or display different patterns of light, especially when disturbed by the canoe or swimming fish. Some accounts describe specific types of bioluminescent trails or flashes associated with proximity to land. Could navigators reliably use this sea fire as an indicator? It's certainly plausible that significant changes in the type or intensity of bioluminescence could signal a change in water depth or nutrient content associated with land. You trail your hand in the water at night, watching the sparks glitter around your fingers. Does the light seem different tonight? More concentrated, perhaps? Or are your eyes just playing tricks in the profound darkness? A truly peculiar sign, mentioned in some traditions, is the behavior of deep-dwelling fish. The idea is that certain fish that normally live deep might come closer to the surface near islands due to upwelling currents or changes in the food chain. Spotting these specific deep-water fish unexpectedly could be another subtle hint. Verifying this scientifically is tricky, to say the least. How would you even know if the fish you just saw usually hangs out 500 feet below? It falls into that category of highly specialized, almost esoteric knowledge that highlights the incredible observational skills involved. It's like a sommelier identifying not just the grape and the region, but the specific row of vines the grapes came from, based on a subtle aftertaste. The academic discussion around these subtle landfall signs often revolves around their reliability and effective range. How far out can you realistically smell land? How consistently does floating debris indicate proximity versus just being random flotsam? Can changes in bioluminescence or watercolor be reliably interpreted, or are they too variable? Modern science can explain the mechanisms behind many of these signs. Thermal effects on wind, wave refraction, bioluminescence triggers, but quantifying their use as precise navigational tools in pre-instrument cultures remains challenging. Researchers might analyze ocean currents to model debris drift or study bird foraging ranges, but replicating the navigator's integrated sensory experience is difficult. It's likely these signs weren't used in isolation, but as a final confirmation checklist when other indicators, stars, swells, clouds, suggested landfall was imminent. They were the closing arguments in the case for land ho. As these signs accumulate, a persistent, stationary cloud, birds heading purposefully towards it, a subtle change in swell pattern, maybe a floating leaf, a faint earthy smell on the wind, the excitement on the Waka becomes palpable. The navigator's calm focus might intensify, their eyes scanning the horizon with even greater diligence. The crew murmurs, pointing, speculating. Years of training, weeks or months of sailing, all culminate in these final hours or days. You feel the anticipation, a knot tightening in your stomach. Every sense is strained, searching for that ultimate confirmation, the low, dark line of land on the horizon. The journey's end is near, whispered on the wind and water long before it meets the eye. And then, finally, after days or weeks adrift on the vast, indifferent blue, it happens. A smudge on the horizon sharpens into a line, then a shape. Trees become distinct, perhaps the glint of a waterfall, the curve of a bay, landfall, the relief. That washes over the Waka is immense, a collective exhale after holding your breath for so long. You've made it. Guided by the stars, the swells, the wind, the birds, and the navigator's incredible mind. You've crossed the largest ocean on Earth to find this tiny speck of life. It feels like a miracle, a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and that deep innate connection to the natural world. This journey you've taken, nestled in the safety of your imagination tonight, echoes thousands of real voyages undertaken over centuries. Polynesian wayfinding wasn't just about getting from A to B. It was the engine of one of the most remarkable human migrations in history. It populated a vast triangle of the Pacific, connecting islands separated by immense distances, creating intricate networks of kinship, trade, and cultural exchange. This knowledge allowed people to not only discover new islands, but also to return home, to maintain contact, to build thriving societies in seemingly isolated locations. It's a widely accepted historical fact that this expansion across the Pacific was achieved through deliberate, navigated voyages, not just accidental drift. Think about the legacy, the very existence of distinct cultures in Hawaii, Rapa Nui, Aotearoa, Tahiti, Samoa, Tonga, and countless other islands is owed to this navigational mastery. The languages, the art forms, the social structures, the unique adaptations to island environments, all were carried across the ocean in vessels like the one you're metaphorically sailing. The knowledge itself, passed down through generations, represents an incredible intellectual heritage, a sophisticated science developed outside the familiar trajectory of Western thought. It challenges our assumptions about what constitutes technology or progress. No metal, no writing for navigation, yet they achieved feats that baffled European explorers centuries later. However, with the arrival of Europeans and the subsequent colonization of the Pacific, much changed. New technologies, particularly the magnetic compass and Western charting methods, were introduced. Traditional voyaging canoes were often replaced by Western-style vessels. More devastatingly, the complex systems of traditional knowledge, including navigation, were often suppressed, dismissed as primitive, or simply fell into disuse as younger generations were assimilated into new educational and economic systems. For a time, it seemed like this ancient art, this profound connection to the ocean, might be lost forever, remembered only in dusty anthropological texts or fading oral histories. Imagine losing the ability to read a map, not just a paper one, but the living map of the world around you. a tragic loss. But the echoes didn't fade completely. In the latter half of the 20th century, something remarkable began to happen. A renaissance. A deliberate effort by Pacific Islanders themselves to reclaim and revitalize their ancestral voyaging traditions. This wasn't just about nostalgia. It was about cultural identity, pride, and reconnecting with a heritage that colonization had tried to erase. A pivotal moment, often cited, was the construction and voyages of the Hockle, a performance replica of a Polynesian double-hulled voyaging canoe, launched in Hawaii, in 1975. Its initial voyages, particularly the 1976 journey to Tahiti guided by Micronesian master navigator Mo Pialog, as few Hawaiians still retained the full knowledge, were electrifying. They proved that non-instrument navigation wasn't a myth. It was real, it worked, and it could be RELEARNED. Since then, the revival has spread across the Pacific. More canoes have been built. Hokianaga, TRF, Fitos, undertaking voyages throughout Polynesia and beyond, training new generations of navigators. These voyages are often deeply meaningful, retracing ancient migration routes, carrying messages of cultural pride and environmental stewardship. It's incredibly inspiring to see young people learning to read the stars and swells again, guided by elders or knowledge holders who have painstakingly pieced together the old ways, sometimes blending traditional knowledge with modern scientific understanding of weather and oceanography. It's like finding a lost language and teaching people to speak it fluently once more. One slightly quirky aspect of this revival is how it sometimes intersects with modern technology, while the core principle is non-instrument navigation. Modern safety regulations often require replica canoes to carry GPS, radios, and emergency beacons on long voyages. This leads to the slightly ironic situation of having satellite tech on board a vessel being navigated by ancient methods. Navigators are trained not to rely on the instruments, often keeping them sealed unless there's a genuine emergency, but their presence highlights the challenges of practicing ancient arts in a modern world. It's like learning to cook over an open fire while having a microwave in the next room. Tempting, but defeats the purpose. The exact extent to which modern revived wayfinding perfectly replicates ancient practices is, of course, a point of academic interest and sometimes internal discussion within the voyaging communities themselves. Given the disruption caused by colonization, have some nuances been lost or reinterpreted? How much cross-pollination has occurred between different island traditions during the revival? Scholars might compare linguistic terms for stars or analyze variations in canoe design, while practitioners focus on the functional knowledge and the cultural continuity. What's undeniable is the powerful impact of the revival in reconnecting people to their heritage, their environment, and each other. It's a living tradition, evolving yet rooted in ancient wisdom. As your own imaginary journey draws to a close, you reflect on this incredible legacy. The ability to find tiny islands in the vast ocean using only natural signs and mental calculation is more than just a skill. It's a profound statement about human potential and our capacity for deep ecological understanding. It's a reminder that there are other ways of knowing, other ways of relating to the world, beyond the instrument-dependent methods we often take for granted. The echoes of those ancient voyages continue to resonate today, carried on the hulls of replica canoes and in the minds of a new generation of wayfinders, ensuring that the pulse of the ocean and the wisdom of the stars will not be forgotten. The first light of dawn paints the sky a soft, pearlescent grey, And the island ahead is no longer a smudge, but a solid reality, green and welcoming. The sounds have changed too. The deep rhythm of the open ocean swells is softening as you enter the calmer waters sheltered by the land. And the cries of seabirds are clearer now, weaving through the gentle lapping of water against the hulls. The air feels different, thick with the scent of damp earth, vegetation, and the promise of stillness after the long dance with the waves. You feel the journey settling within you, the weeks at sea compressing into a vivid tapestry of starlit nights, sun-drenched days, and the constant, gentle rocking of the Waka. Your temporary home, your connection to the vastness. The navigator gives quiet instructions, guiding the canoe towards a safe passage through the reef, their movements economical and precise, their face calm but perhaps with a hint of deep satisfaction. The intense focus of the open ocean crossing gives way to a quieter sense of arrival. The journey's end isn't abrupt, but a gradual easing into the embrace of land. You find your own breath slowing, your muscles unknotting from the tension of anticipation. There is a profound peace in this moment, a sense of having been part of something ancient and deeply significant. The challenges faced, the skills learned, the connection felt to the sea, the sky, and the vessel itself, all coalesce into a quiet feeling of accomplishment, not of conquering the ocean, but of having moved respectfully within its embrace. As the Waka glides closer to the shore, towards the waiting figures on the beach, the gentle sounds of the island seem to wrap around you like a warm blanket. The long voyage is over. It is time to rest, to feel solid ground beneath your feet, and to carry the echoes of the ocean within you as you drift towards sleep.